Psych, I lied. If you came from the last video, whenever this video goes up, but I feel like doing a review of Bel-Air because none of y'all are watching it, and you should, because it's good. It's a good show, and more people should watch it. So I want to talk about Bel-Air. I guess if I want people to watch the show, I will try not to spoil too much, but spoiler warning, I guess. If you have lived under a rock for the past 2 years, Bel-Air is a more serious, dramatic reboot of the original Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, starring one Will Smith.
Shut up!
As created by Andy and Susie Burrowitz and Benny Medina and Jeff Pollock. If you see my eyes dart off, it's because I have like information here because I can't remember everything off the top of my head. I'm sorry. Essentially, the narrative of the show just follows Will Smith, a kid from West Philly who gets in one little fight. The mom gets scared, and he's moving in with his auntie and uncle Bel-Air. It plays up the real drama and tension of how dangerous something like that could be, especially in a real life scenario. It modernizes it in a lot of ways. I kind of want to talk about it because I don't see enough people talking about it, and it's really good. I know a lot of people have like a lot of trepidation of reboots and remakes, and so with this being essentially not a full-blown, it's a reinterpretation, I'll say, of the original series. It still has the same characters, but it updates them. It does a lot, I'll say. It's like, I know everybody jokes about that gritty, dramatic reboot, and this is kind of another case, but it is based off of a fan film that picked up a lot of, I'd say positive reception. I was a fan of the original fan film. I thought it was a great concept, and then Will picked it up, and it came here, and they put in work. I'm actually thoroughly impressed with how well this show was executed. All of the respect to the work that Morgan Cooper did, as well as people, Malcolm Spellman, who is also, I believe, is he the the showrunner for Falcon and Winter Soldier. He also worked on Empire, so he's a great writer. I really like some of his past work. TJ Brady, and Rashid Newson. So they did a lot of great work putting this show together and picking up a lot of narrative plots, and elements from the original show and kind of re-putting into this one. So I kind of want to talk about the story and the characters, but not give too much detail because I still want people to go out and watch the show and go support the show. It's over on, I think, Paramount Plus? No, it's on Peacock. Sorry. Oh, I almost led y'all to the wrong service. It's on Peacock. So let's talk about the characters and the actors in portrayal. So it starts with, we have Jabari Banks as Will Smith. Jabari is a showstopper. Dude's fantastic. Oh my God. Like, I remember when it was first announced that he was playing Will and it showed his reaction and everything, and everyone was like, he don't look like no Will. He ain't got the swagger like Will. He does. He sells you on him not only embodying Will Smith, like the actor, but also Will Smith, the character. And he makes it his own in some regards, but he also takes a lot from what made Will likable. So he's leaning on not Will Smith, the actor's charisma. He's using his own charisma, but taking Will Smith, the character, that swagger, his ability to, talk to girls, his athleticism, his intellect. He's a smart guy. He's a really smart. All these elements that make him a likable lead, and kind of use that in a modern context. So it's like, if you're a kid in trouble, but you have all these great things going for you character-wise, and you have your own moral center, I think that makes for very interesting television, but also with how young he's supposed to be in this. He's, 16. There is a birthday moment, so he turned 17 in the first season. So fingers crossed there's more. But no, Jabari Banks as Will Smith is great. And the arc he primarily follows has to do with transitioning to Bel-Air, transitioning to his lifestyle, moving away from one environment to another one, and it does touch on that episode, the how come you don't want me episode. So it does touch on that. No, Jabari Banks does a fantastic job. I was sold on him about as fast as I was sold on Robert Pattinson as Batman, which is to say about 15 minutes into seeing it. This is a year full of surprises from actors I, didn't think Robert Pattinson would be a particularly good Batman. I was entirely wrong. That's not true. I didn't think it was going to be bad. I just didn't, I didn't know what to think of it. And I was sold within minutes of watching the Batman. You will get that review eventually. Same for Jabari Banks. I was sold within minutes of just him embracing and embodying this very, very likable, fun, athletic, cool, swaggy character. So, it all worked. He very much has
the exaggerated swagger of a black teen.
The swagger. The swagger of a black teen. He really makes you feel like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Cassandra Freeman is Vivian. Aunt Viv. Also a notable point is all of the Banks in this version are darker skinned actors, which I think is like a interesting touch, leaning into one of the conversation about, in the original, they're mostly lighter skinned except for Carlton and Ashley. It was a good actually mix. Especially like old Aunt Viv before, new Aunt Viv, and a lot of commentary about like a lack of hiring practices for darker skinned actors. So it was nice to kind of see a little bit of a change of pace, Beautiful cast. Oh my God, fucking stunning. But Vivian, still supportive, still nurturing to Will and his education and the family and her being a linchpin. But now you get a little bit more of an interesting role of, I remember in the original Aunt Viv was a teacher and a former dancer. So in this version, she's a former artist, but primarily is kind of more like the Michelle to Uncle Phil's Obama while he runs for district attorney. They also, go through that story arc a little bit as well. And that has a very interesting conclusion where a lot of narrative points from the beginning of the show kind of start to come together. And it puts a lot of pressure for people to make choices, I should say. Oh my God, no wonder the music slaps so hard. It's Terrace Martin and Robert Glasper. They're fucking phenomenal. The music in the show is pretty good too. They have a playlist on Spotify. I've been listening through it recently. They have some really great selections, not just of like original music, but also like curated artists, and it's put me on to new people and everything. There are some directions where I thought it was gonna go, and I was hoping it wasn't, because it was very like stereotypical drama, and it's like introducing elements, but it's like, no, they make it actually pretty explicit that it's not going one way where you think it might be, or it goes another way, but there's still a conflict that results from it. And I think it's creative because it takes a pretty tired trope and kind of flips on its head, because it's like, well, let's get to the root of the matter before it gets to like this becoming a bigger issue, which I think is good. A thing that I really like about the show is that people talk to resolve conflicts in a good chunk of the show. I mean, of course, the foundation of the show has to start with like a conflict that doesn't get resolved through talking. And that whole situation is a totally realistic misunderstanding. When you see the context, it's like, yeah, even Will doesn't have the full details of like what happened to lead situations to escalate in the fight. Cassandra Freeman does like a great job as still showing that care and concern, but also having that fire underneath her. And you also see a little bit of doubt at certain moments and kind of ways where she's grown. One of the elements is like how people worry about Will forgetting his roots, especially his friend Trey, who I believe in the original was played by Don Cheadle. So that's a callback. There's a lot of callbacks in this show to like original plots and elements, which I think is great. How they rework it for this version, I think is fantastic. But for Aunt Viv, one of them involves like her relationship with the kids, and in particular Hilary, and supporting Hilary. And things like that. And while we're talking about it, let's talk about Hilary. The reimagined version of Hilary is fantastic. In the original, Hilary was like a very bougie, spoiled, rich kid, trust fund, not that bright, basically like a black, rich Kelly Bundy, who somehow failed upwards into being a weather girl and then having her own show. This one, I think, does a much better take on that, where it's just like, for a character that was originally super duper vapid and vain and money focused, this one, it's like she's a chef, but also a social media content creator, which I think is a good pairing, because one, it gives her a actual useful skill set and shows that it's like, hey, she's competent at something. That's nice, so it's nice to make her a little bit more proactive, but also her being in the era of content creation, which is something you have to be just a little self-indulgent to create content and put it out there and expect people to want to come back to see you and revisit you on a regular basis. Case in point. So it takes like a little bit of a hint and applies it in a new way. And I think it's great. I think it's handled well because I think she's incredibly likable, and where her arc goes, I think is really interesting because it's like, okay, how do I get out of, my parents' beach house? How do I get out from under their wing? She's, I think she's 19, 20. So it's like at this point, she's like decided to stop going to college. And it's like, I want a full-time pursue a career in content creation, which now is a feasible thing to do. It's hard, but it's feasible, but with like hard work and consistency, it's and a good amount of luck, it's feasible. So it's like she has skills and she has a brand that she curates, and she's good at social media management, and it leads her to ending up being around some people where she has to make a decision about is this a place I want to stay, or do I want to transition out of it? And by the end of the season, some other doors may have opened for her. So I really, really like that part of it. Coco Jones plays Hilary, by the way, and she's everything. She is everything all at once at the same time. Oh, she's great. Oh, she's so good. Absolutely stunning. But also just the acting is totally on point. Like, she's killing it with this. So I think she's great. Jimmy Akingbola as Jeffrey. Jeffrey, who's now the house manager, formerly the butler in the original, who was from England. In this version, he's the house manager from Jamaica. And then he moved to London when he was young. So, there's a little bit of there's still a connection there. He still ends up coming from Britain in a sense, but he still has his Jamaican accent and everything. And Jeffrey kind of plays a dual role. He handles the groceries, gets the bags, checks in guests, but he's not afraid to get his hands a little bit dirty. Him and Phil have a lot of history beyond what we just kind of see and know in the show. So he's also has a bit of a fixer side to him. He makes problems disappear, and he answers questions that are a little bit hard to solve, especially by the tail end of the season. So I think he's a really good supporting character. He's less jokey than the original Jeffrey was. The original Jeffrey was like the king of snark and one-liners and wit. He's fucking fantastic, up there with the other butler from The Nanny, but just to cut under, because Jeffrey had them zingers, boy, for your ass.
And boarding school's not so bad, is it, Jeffrey? Jeffrey went to boarding school. Tell her, Jeffrey.
Madam, I went to boarding school.
Street, Daddy?
I did not throw him into the street.
Quite right, sir. You threw him on the lawn. He rolled into the street.
Jeffrey, you look great today. Have you done something different with your hair?
Yes, I stopped pulling it out.
But this Jeffrey, he kind of lets his actions speak for him instead of his words. So he's very solemn, very reserved. And the dynamic between him and Phil, especially with a very climactic part that ties into the whole aspect of talking about Lou. We'll get to that a little bit later. It's touching to see how much he cares about this family, but also how much he observes. He's a very observant character, so it's like, he's very much someone that watches from the backgrounds in different areas. So sometimes you'll see him watching over other characters to make sure people are safe, or seeing if he has to intervene or something like that. So he very much cares for this family, which I think is a nice switch from the original Jeffrey, who I think he cared in his own way. But, I'm still thinking about the episode where he thought he won the lottery and basically said, "Screw you," to the whole family, just dipped out. So he's great. Oh boy. Ali Sholatan as Carlton Banks, the lacrosse playing middle child. Carlton is arguably the most interesting character evolution wise in the show, because for the first half of it, he's kind of the primary antagonist. There's an antagonistic force, but it's kind of on the back burner. There's definitely a little bit of concern, but in terms of what's directly impacting Will's life, it's very much Carlton. And it touches on a lot of notes of like the stereotypical Oreo character. FD Signifier recently dropped his video about Will Smith, and I'm mad I didn't get to drop my review before, because now I feel like it's gonna impact my opinion a little bit, because he talked about a lot of elements in the show that really work, both in the original but also in the reimagining. And so this version of Carlton is just so he's very much a more realized version of that stereotype and that fear that I think a lot of Black people have of a Black person that's so out of touch culturally that they kind of almost forget that they are Black, you know, and what that means in this world and how he's kind of looked at. And that does pop up in one episode where there's a house party. Culturally, him and Will are so at odds. And, you know, for the beginning, like, I really couldn't stand him, which is a testament to his acting, you know, and especially to the writing. I think but I will say it's like maybe a little too on the nose, but I think it's to drive home a point, because by the end, there's a moment in the show that I love where him and Will reconcile, and they really learn to kind of grow and develop a little bit more respect for each other, which is kind of similar to the original show. But you know, and Will still ribs on him, Will still, you know, will make casual jokes and like stuff like that. But there is a additional element, because in this version, you know, Carlton and Lisa used to date and broke up. And, you know, if you remember Lisa from the original, you know, Lisa was, you know, Lisa,
Baby, you all that in a bag of chips.
but Lisa was like one of the bigger love interests in the show, and I will of course get to her. But that adds an additional kind of layer to what makes the complexity when Will starts to kind of start eyeing Lisa, and Carlton's like, you know, that's, you know, this is my place, this is my territory, this is my culture, and that's my ex. So, you know, now you're dealing with blood. But, you know, seeing Carlton, I could very much see from personal experience the type of person he was supposed to be. And he has a lot of trouble. And they touch on another plot point from the original show of, or not plot point, episode, you know, of Carlton battling with drugs. But in this one, they kind of recontextualize it in the realm of Carlton having anxiety. And so he, you know, I think it is an interesting lens with when we talk about that interesting history between like Black people and drugs, specifically like the damage that drug addiction has done. It shifted because when you're in a different tax bracket, the drugs you do are different. So it's like him suffering from opioid addiction, of all things, because the opiates are used to treat his anxiety. So it's kind of using, you know, anytime there's anxiety, it's just like boom, 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 boom. So he starts to, you know, develop a little bit of a habit, of a routine, and it does, you know, that also has its own point where Will and Carlton, and they kind of redo that storyline a little bit. So there's a lot of moving parts. Yeah, Ollie by the end is like, I think some have said he's probably the most complex and interesting character show, and I'm more inclined to agree with that. Akira Akbar plays Ashley Banks, so she's 12, she's the youngest. So if you remember in some of the later seasons, you know, initially Ashley is just like the cute little sister of the family, and that still applies here. You know, Akira does a great job, but honestly, she's probably the weakest character, but she still does have a bit of her own storyline that takes an interesting direction. If you remember in the original, in the later seasons, yeah, of course, Ashley became a singer at one point, and was starting to develop her own. But one of the things was she was very passionate about kind of her feminism for a little bit. Like if you still remember that clip of her, you know, everyone going, ah, men. She's like, ah, woman. So they make that a core element of this version of Ashley, where she is outwardly more so outspoken about social justice. You know, she'll talk about climate change, she'll talk about you know, Black Lives Matter, feminist theories, but a big one is queer rights. And I don't want to give anything away too much, but there is a storyline and there's a direction for those things, and it's touched on. So I think it's good how they kind of give that attention. I think it's good to see some positive representation of like a Black family being supportive of a queer loved one, and kind of what that means, especially someone that's so young. You know, she's supposed to be 12, and kind of like you have parents from a different generation, a different like cultural background, dealing with something that is still growing in acceptance within the community, despite how integral a role we've played in pushing the social justice so far. So, it's definitely, they have a couple conversations. I think it leads to some good moments, and not only good moments between Black women, which I think is really, really important, really, really nice to see. So she's the weakest character, but she does have like some moments that I think. Simone Joy Jones as Lisa. She's different from the original Lisa in a fair amount of ways, wherein I think Lisa in the original was, she was kind of a counterbalance to Will. He was kind of loud and rambunctious, and she kind of like tolerated it, but she like enjoyed him and enjoyed his wit and was supportive. This Lisa is a lot more down to earth, more like girl next door-y, but she has like her own talents with poetry and writing. And you get more backstory about like her mom that passed away and what her relationship with her dad is like, who's like chief of police, and that has its own storyline implications too, a really important one. But her kind of being this back and forth between Carlton and Will unintentionally. So I don't think she's objectified in that sense, because she's still her own character and she makes her own independent choices away from them quite often, I'd say. So I don't think she ends up being, just kind of like framing, or just like an object for them. I think she does end up serving a purpose, but it is nice to see, in the development of her and Will's relationship, like she makes an explicit point that after the fallout of the relationship with Carlton, and given the fact that they're cousins living in the same home, she just really wants to like start out as friends and see where things go. And throughout the course of the show, you get to see where things go. But no, she's just absolutely like very, very just like a lovely presence, because I think this is a good pairing where it's like Will is really rambunctious and high energy, and Lisa's very low-key. Lisa's very chill. Lisa's very relaxed, but she can, like, same way he can give a joke, she can kind of fire it back, and I think that makes for a good chemistry. But conversely, you can also see some of the elements of what might have like had that balance with Carlton, because she's a little bit more in touch with like the community and what people are doing, and he's trying to kind of engage maybe a little bit more with that side of himself, but wasn't fully able to embrace it, and kind of focused a little bit more on himself than maybe his relationship, which is why it failed. So Will being able to pick up in those elements where Carlton wasn't able to succeed, and how that's navigated, and how Lisa handles it. But yeah, another beautiful actress, lovely eyebrows. Shout out to eyebrows. Her eyebrows are fire. Jordan L. Jones is Jazz. So we got a reimagined version of Jazz. He's a taxi driver. Will meets him on the way when he's actually the guy that picks him up from LAX. So he's the first person he really meets before he runs into his family. He also owns a record store, and he is also the love interest for Hilary. And I think it's interesting how they reworked that one. Because remembering in the show, Jazz and Will had a bit of their own history based off Jazzy Jeff. But Jordan Jones looks a lot like Tay from former member of Dormtainment, Tay. So every time I see him, I'm like, Tay, is that? No, it's Jordan Jones. It's completely different. Couldn't be the same dude. But no, I think Jazz is like cool, easygoing. I think what he gives to Hilary as a character is nice. They have good chemistry with one another. Him being like a record store owner is kind of a flip on him. The real Jazzy Jeff being like a DJ, I think that's a good compromise, and him having such an appreciation for like musical history and wax, and not being social media savvy. So it's like there are some elements where he's maybe lacking in the tech world, but he's not like outwardly ignorant. He's still kind of in touch with his people, in touch with his culture. And at the end of the season, he plays like a really important role in terms of a significant conversation that ends up being had with Will. So I like how he's reworked as an addition. Then the last one is Adrian Holmes as Philip Banks. He's Will's uncle. He's a lawyer running for district attorney, so they're adapting that storyline. He's good. He's very good. He's a complex character too, I believe. He's probably like the second most complex one on the show. because he has so much to kind of juggle. He's trying to be a father. He's trying to keep up with his family. In terms of image, he's trying to run for district attorney. He's trying to manage being both a high earning individual while also staying in touch with his cultural roots, being a man from South Carolina. They did bring that back, which made me happy. So, and that's actually one of the plot points within, there's an episode involving his fraternity, and, you know, within Black community, fraternity means like a lot, if you remember, you know, one of the Divine Nines particular. So the one that, I think the one that in the show is made up, but it's like, nonetheless, you know, he has his nickname and his steps and everything like that. But, you know, having talked to people is like, that's a big thing. Like, that brotherhood is like brotherhood. Balancing all these different roles. And throughout the show, you're kind of seeing, it's like, what is and isn't getting lost? What is and isn't being prioritized? What is and isn't being sacrificed, you know, for optics? How important is this district attorney candidateship to him, you know, in comparison to his family? And how does he strike that balance? And does it really work? So there are some good questions there. And he's not as, you know, thick, portly as James Avery was. Nothing but respect to, you know, first things first, rest in peace, Uncle Phil, the OG, the Shredder himself. But I think Adrian Holmes brings his own to it, because the original Phil was very stern, you know, no nonsense. But this one's a lot more laid back. He knows how to code switch exceedingly well. He knows how to keep that balance and kind of get people to be on his side. I think the issue is him trying to navigate what it is that he really wants out of life, and him almost being so protective of his loved ones to a fault, even, and that shows up even from the beginning because of the pivotal role that he plays in saving Will from his situation, you know, bringing him out to Bel-Air and everything, and getting him into school and getting a lot of situations handled, you know, under the table. So yeah, no, I think he's really good. I say he's probably the second most complex one, just because there's so much that he has kind of going on in terms of his relationships with other characters, from how he navigates his relationship to Hilary, his relationship with Will, his relationship with Carlton, his relationship with Lou, his relationship with Vivian, his relationship with Jeffrey. So it's like I think the core thing is like how he navigates his relationships is a really interesting part of how he's adapted in this version. There's a bunch of other actors here, you know, Vi, Will's mother, is in the show as a bit more of a supporting character. She's good. Trey, his best friend, you know, I think he's good in terms of creating kind of roots for Will. He kind of helps fills out that background layer of what his life was like in Philly, and we get a little bit more of an image of that. You know, we get to meet Fred, Lisa's dad, and how he's a little bit reinterpreted in this version, and how he's a little so without spoiling, what does the show kind of do? So it does Will Smith going out to Philly. It even has like the big party, and it does that in a whole remix way that I really dig. It has Will going out to Philly. It has Will starting at Bel-Air Academy. It has Will's basketball career and what that means. It has Will and Lisa and their relationship. It has Hilary finding herself. It has Ashley's feminist elements. It has Phil running for DA. It has Vivian returning to a form of work in a sense. But I think some of the bigger ones that it does is it does Carlton's drug story. It also has Will and Trey's relationship too, which is some from the original. But Carlton's drug story, which was a big one. And I say the biggest one, and the one that everybody remembers, is Will's relationship with Lou, his dad. And that's an underlying element that plays a big role, I'd say, in the last 3 episodes. I'm not going to spoil what happens, but it is, it works really well, I'd say, because it kind of does it twice a little bit. I'll say something. Jabari Banks can cry, and he looks just like Will Smith. Like, if, you know, he got the cry on point, the tears, the eyes, everything. Just like, you just feel bad for this kid when you see it. But doing the whole, you know, how come you don't want me, man? Like, how they redo that, and given the context, especially in the last episode, I think the last episode is pretty darn strong in my opinion, because you remember that Will is like a recent 17-year-old by the end of it, and that he still kind of got those actions, those behaviors, those mannerisms, and that mentality to him. And that's a very emotionally vulnerable state to be in, especially with a absent relationship with a significant parental figure. And how they handle that by the end, only thing I'll say is that you do meet Lou. It's not who I thought it would be, but who they get did a fantastic job. I was thoroughly impressed. I did not think the actor that they chose had it in him. It's somebody that you'll probably be familiar with. Yeah, I was blown. I was like, oh shit, I didn't know you had this. Where has this been? You know, I need to see you do more. When I think about it, they've done dramas before, but yeah, it was a surprising pick, but a really, really well done one. So storyline wise, it's juggling a lot of different elements here, but I think they don't all get resolved by the end of the season. And I think, but where it ends, oddly enough, could be a series finale, but there's like so many doors that are open and relatively ambiguous. I want a second season, so I kind of want to go in and rewatch the show with friends. It has a lot of heart to it. It has a lot of passion, and it has a lot of focus, in my opinion. You know, as far as like weaknesses go, honestly, the main thing I can think of is that Ashley doesn't have as much to do, but I like the fact that it's 10 episodes, so it's compact. So they have to be really efficient with how they use their time. But each episode is like 45 to an hour. So that's a good fit. That's a good, amount, I say, to give everything attention. But I found myself at the end, I was like, I want to see the next episode. I want to see, like, after the first one, I'm like, okay. And they dropped the first 3. Thank God they did. Because I was instantly into it. I was like, yes. I'm like, oh, this is intriguing. What happens next? What happens next? So by the end of the show, I'm like, so what are they gonna do with this? What are they gonna do about this situation that they got going on? So yeah, those are my thoughts on Bel-Air. I actually have a Bel-Air shirt that I should have worn for this, but it is what it is, and we're here where we are now. So yeah. With that said, have any of y'all seen Bel-Air? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. I really like to hear that. I really like to hear other people's opinions about the show. The cinematography's dope, music's dope. It works for me. Acting I think is off the charts. Whole cast is fine. Whole cast is beautiful cast, but very, very talented. A lot of new names that I have to keep an eye out for, because I was familiar with like 2 of the actors that I've seen on the show, and keep your eye out. There might be some familiar faces. Near the latter half of the show, I saw a couple faces, and I'm like, saw what you did there. I'd like to see some more of this. I thought we was gonna get a lot more, but they were very, very smart about some surprises that they got in the show. So keep an eye out. There's a lot of references in the show to the original. It does a good job, bringing it up to a modern generation. So it has a lot of potential, and I'm very excited to see where the show goes. Unlike Grownish. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. My name has been Will. Oh, don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you can know when I put out new content. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and share the video with your friends. Have them let me know what their thoughts are down below. And with that being said, I've been Will the Greatest. Be great to one another. I will see you in the next video. Yo homes to my bed.